Welcome back to my channel for a hopefully super interesting Leica episode. And you see here in front of me on the table the new Leica Q3 28mm Monochrom. I've reviewed this camera already on my channel. You find my introductory thoughts and everything you need to know about that camera, as well as a first test shooting in low light with super high ISO values. And I will post the links to these videos down below in the info box. And here on the right hand side, you see my standard Leica Q3 28mm. And what I did not in detail cover in my introductory video on the Leica Q3 Monochrom is that the menu system and the graphical user interface changed compared to the standard edition. And that's what I want to explore in this video. And in particular, I want to make you aware of the differences what Leica changed for this newest Leica Q3 camera compared to the standard version. And you will see there are some really convenient upgrades in this new firmware here, in the way Leica presents the menu, in the graphical user interface, how we as photographers interact with the camera. Let's kick this off. If you have not yet subscribed to my channel, please do so. Subscribe, hit the notification bell, support my work. Many thanks for that. All right, let's go right into the topic. These two Q3 cameras, they do not only look alike, they are almost the same. And the design of the camera body, very much the same. The texture here on the Monochrom is slightly different, but it has the same control elements. It has the same build quality. It is exactly the same design. And also the lenses are exactly the same. On both Q3 cameras, we have a Leica Summilux lens, widest open f1.7, 28mm. And there are two major hardware differences between these two cameras. The first one is an obvious one. Here we have a monochrome sensor and here we have a color sensor. The second one is not so obvious. The Leica Q3 standard version has no content credentials. And let me switch this on for a moment and let me show this to you in the menu. So if we go here to the very last page, we have here Leica content credentials. And that means the content authenticity initiative, which is the protocol which Leica is using here, enables you to track any change that will be done to any footage of you shot with this camera. And you see here on the copyright and produced by section, I included my math photographer, which I basically make appear always in metadata of cameras I'm shooting with. And this feature here, Leica content credentials, that's the way it is called, is not in the Leica Q3 28 and not in the Leica Q3 43. And the reason why you will never see it in these Q3 cameras is that it needs a hardware chip. It needs, for the encoding, a hardware component, which Leica had enough time to squeeze in addition in this compact camera body, whereas here it's missing. And there is no way with firmware, software, tweaks whatsoever to get this functionality, this feature built into the Q3 28 and the Q3 43. It's exclusively at this point in time in the Q3 lineup, only in the Q3 Monochrom. And that's the second big hardware difference we have here. We have a monochrome sensor, we have a color sensor, we have content credentials, and we have no content credentials in the Q3 28 and the Q3 43. And what Leica also changed, and that is interesting and is what I'm going to explore with you together in this video, they also changed without a lot of noise, without a lot of announcements, the menu system and the graphical user interface. And I want to show this to you in this video. I have really good reasons to believe if it is in here, we will see it very soon also in here. I have now from the left-hand side my Leica SL3 Reporter Special Edition. I have here the Leica Q3 Monochrom and here the standard Leica Q3 28mm. And guess what? The menu system, if we look at the control screen here of the Leica SL3 and the Q3 Monochrom, they look pretty much the same. And Leica introduced for the Q3 Monochrom for the first time in a Q camera the so-called icons, which is an artificial word coming from Leica and icons. And they were introduced with the introduction of the Leica SL3 back then at the influencer event on the Wetzlar campus of Leica in Germany. And that's what we see here. Look at this. I have set up my Leica Q3 Monochrom in the same way as my Leica SL3 here on the control screen. And you see it's the same symbols, it's the same design. You see the difference here to the standard Leica Q3. Here we have 5 columns on the standard Leica Q3. And on the Q3 Monochrom and the SL3, we have 4 columns in this matrix of fields. And there is also a big advantage on the Q3 Monochrom and the Leica SL3, namely that you can customize this control screen. So I show you, for instance, here I've set up my user profiles. If I tap and hold, I can choose other things which I want to appear there. For instance, file format, if you look here. And then I have here the file format and no longer the user profiles. You see it here. Now I have a double, of course. Let's tap again. Let's go back to user profiles. That is what I want here. And I have set up in the same way the Leica SL3. And on the Q3 standard version, you don't have that. I can tap and hold here whatever I want. It will never give me a menu where I can choose some other function assigned to that soft button here. Have a look. I tap and hold, nothing happens. It's just not possible to customize this control screen here. Whereas here, I have here, for instance, the self timer. Let me quickly tap and hold here. And then I can also have here, for instance, the Leica Photos app. And you see it's appearing right here with the same icon as it would appear on the Leica SL3. And that is the first big difference I want to show and mention here. We finally have, and a lot of people asked for that, the graphical user interface of the Leica SL3 imported into a Leica Q3 camera. And it started with the Q3 Monochrom, and it might find its way into the standard Leica Q3 28 and Q3 43. And why do I believe that? Well, it's just software. You know, you will not get the content credentials into the SL3 because the SL3 has, based on product cycles, not this hardware component. It will not find its way into the Leica Q3 standard, and it has only its way found into the Q3 Monochrom because here the development cycle was later and this hardware component was just built in. But the graphical user interface, the menu structure, that is something which is pure software. What you see here today on the Q3 Monochrom will also find its way into the other 2 Q3 cameras. So let's look at another big difference, and let's look at the Q3 standard first. If I start to press the menu button from the control screen here, it toggles through different pages, and there is a page number here. This is page number 1 with settings, page number 2 with settings, and so on until page number 6, and then it toggles back into the control screen. That is totally different solved on the Leica SL3 and on the Leica Q3 Monochrom. If I press here the menu button, it also starts, but it doesn't go in horizontal direction, it goes in vertical direction. And pressing the menu button a second time jumps to a second page, and I get here a little indicator. 3rd page, 4th page, 5th page, and so on, then back into the control screen. And I can also go through this like a list. I just go down here and you see how it goes from line item to line item. And that's exactly the way how this is organized now in the Q3 Monochrom. If you look here, if I press the menu button once, it starts that list and the pages are organized in a vertical direction with this indicator. Page 2, page 3, page 4 with settings, page 5, and so on. So this is exactly the way how the menu is organized on the Leica SL3. And of course, as I said, all the icons are the same. Not the order of line items, but the way they appear. So for instance, if you look at exposure metering here, let's try to find this here. We have it just here, exposure metering. And you see here, the symbol for exposure metering is now exactly the same. If we do this here and go here to exposure metering, is the old school icon, is not a Leica, namely Leica icon. And that is something which is totally eye-catching, but I think Leica introduced this in a very silent way for the very first time into a Q3 camera. And there are lots of these differences we can spot in the menu. I will not go through all of them, just want to give you a flavor, but let's look at least into a couple more. Here's another difference I wanted to show you, and I said, let's go through a couple of more differences. And I wanted to show this by means of file format. So if we look into file format on the Leica SL3, let's go into that menu. We have here DNG, DNG and JPEG in the way we have seen this for many years on Leica SL cameras. If we go here, we have the same as on the Leica SL3, DNG, DNG and JPEG. And on the Q3 Monochrom, this is different. Look here. We get here all types of combinations now of LDNG, MDNG, and SDNG, where we shoot only in RAW, and then all the possible combinations of DNGs and JPEGs. And on the Leica SL3, you actually have to do this differently in the same way as on the Q3 standard. Let me quickly show you. So here you have only DNG, DNG and JPEG. And if you have chosen DNG and JPEG, you can actually, on the next menu entry, when we go into JPEG settings, steer in a separate menu item that you want to have LJPEG or MJPEG or SJPEG. And that's the same here on the Q3 standard. If I go back here after choosing DNG and JPEG, we go here to JPEG settings, and then here in this separate menu entry, as we just saw it on the Leica SL3, I can say whether I want L, M, or S. And that is different here, because here you get under file format all combinations on a silver plate, and you can choose what you want. And that is, of course, more convenient, more efficient than if you have to set this up via several menu entries. And I think this is in a clever way solved here. Really like it. If you look here, I have this setting typically LJPEG and LDNG, LJPEG only for preview before I go into post, because post-processing will happen exclusively with RAW files, means DNG. Here's another example where the menu structure is different and where the Q3 Monochrom very likely, in my opinion, sets the new benchmark. I believe this is the blueprint of changes we'll see maybe even in both firmwares on the Leica SL3 as well as on the Q3 standard 28 and 43. And the next example I want to make is customize control. Let's first push the button on the SL3, and let's then push the button on the Monochrom, and let's push the button on the Q3. And you see under customize control, this is completely different. And the first difference here is that on the Q3 standard, we still have edit favorites. I can choose here certain favorites, which will then create an additional page between the control screen and page number 1. So let's just, for the sake of completeness, choose a couple of things here. And let's go back into the control screen. And then you see now there is an asterisk or a star page between the control screen and page number 1, where these elements I just selected are shown and displayed. And actually there was quite a debate. I think a lot of people would love to have this type of favorite mechanism back on the Leica SL3 and now very likely also on the Q3 Monochrom. But since these firmwares here can be customized anyway in a much more elevated way than the Q3 standard, I don't think we'll see this. But this is the first big difference. Let's go back to customize control. And then we see another difference where actually the Q3 Monochrom and the SL3 are aligned again. Because here we have only one menu entry, FN buttons. Here we have only one menu entry. Let's push the center button. Let's push the joystick here. And then you see this is giving me the list, which is now universally and in a uniform way giving me the option to switch on or off certain elements which I see in the customization list if I long press a customizable FN button. And let's go back here. Let's also go back here. And here it's different. Here on the Q3 standard, there is still a separate menu entry for FN button number 1 and then another one for FN button number 2. And then even one for the center button, which is also included here in the FN button. Because everything I select in that list here and switch on or enable, I can also choose later here by long pressing the center button. You see, all these elements which are enabled in this menu we just looked into customize control, they can be selected here. As I said, I don't want to walk you through all the differences I spotted. This will become an overly long video. All I want to do is make you aware that there is a strong alignment between the Leica SL3 menu and graphical user interface and the new Q3 Monochrom, and that I personally believe, but drop me a comment what your opinion is, that we'll see these elements and this graphical user interface, which is in both the SL3 now and the Q3 Mono, very likely will find its way also into the Q328 and the Q343. But let me make one more example, and that's under Capture Assistance. Let's go back here. So you see that I have selected the same word line item on all three cameras. You see here Capture Assistance, you see it here, and you also see it here. Now let's go into this menu on all three cameras. And you see, if you forget a moment about the image overlay on the SL3, which is a feature which is not available for the Q cameras, you see this is organized on the Q3 Monochrom in the same way as on the SL3. And I fully customized my Q3 Monochrom already. I can tell you it's the look, feel, and touch of an SL3 camera. Here it's different. If we go here in Capture Assistance, we only can switch on and switch off the grid, you know, the clipping, the level gauge, the histogram, and we can also deactivate it. And there is no way to make this in info profiles very precise what you want to have and then toggle between these info profiles in the same way as you can do it on the Q3 Monochrom now in alignment with the Leica SL3. Anyway, let me close that video. I hope you get the point. It is worthwhile to explore, and I did it. And there are lots of things which I found where we see that the Q3 Monochrom is now almost fully aligned with the Leica SL3. And since this is the newer camera, on a couple of things I found where the Q3 Monochrom is differently organized. For instance, here's the file format, where we have these combinations all spelled out already. I think this is something which very likely we'll find also in the SL3 going forward, because in the SL3 we still have the same structure as in the Q3 standard. And we can then later specify under JPEG settings whether we want to have large, medium, and small. Here it's all in one menu in all possible combinations you can think of. I think this feature, for instance, will go into the Leica SL3 in a firmware update. And the overall graphical user interface, as we have it on both of these cameras, very likely will find its way into the Q328 and 43. All right, that's kind of what I wanted you to make aware of, and I hope you liked that presentation. If you have a Q3 Monochrom and a Q3 standard, start to look into this yourself and spot the differences. There is a lot to see and a lot to become conscious about. If you liked that video, don't forget to drop me a thumbs up. Stay tuned on my channel. There's always more to come. Thanks for watching. Stay safe and healthy, and of course, peace out.